from OK Island. I am Newt. Hey everyone, what's been mulling over in my mind recently is words. Words are important. Words matter. I've been thinking about that. I've shared it with my men's group. And recently, after I posted my 3 favorite books I read this year, it occurred to me that one of the things that stood out in each of the books was the revelation of the meaning of the word, its original intent. You know, if words are misused, misapplied, misconstrued, they can affect us. They can affect our thoughts and our attitudes. Words do matter. Jesus said, in fact, when the Pharisees complained about his disciples not washing their hands before they eat, he said, it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but what comes out of his mouth. That's what defiles a man. Matthew 15:11, I believe. So let's talk about words. So what's the first word? First book, Ecclesia by Ed Silvoso. Just yesterday came across an interview. Lance Wallnau interviewed him on YouTube, about an hour. Great summary of the whole book. I highly encourage you to get the book, go listen to that interview. One of the best books of the year. Obviously the word here is ecclesia, or in our common English word, what has become church. Don and I recently watched William Tyndale, and when he originally translated the Greek ecclesia into English, he translated it the assembly. And I'll tell you why that's more correct. Ed here points out that in the original, Jesus he didn't make up the term ecclesia. It was already in use as a civil term, as a governmental term, and it was first developed for use as the Greeks. The Greek Empire was vast, and when they established city-state governments, they would have convene a group of citizens in each of the city-states, and that would be their governing authority. So the ecclesia was a group of citizens used to legislate the rule of the empire in their locality. Does that make sense? The Romans overtook the Grecians and they incorporated the same thing. The Roman Empire was vast. Rome's reach was affected through the ecclesia. In each town and governance, each region, there would be an ecclesia. That's the actual citizens of Rome. Many of the people who they ruled over were not citizens, but the citizens of Rome would represent Rome because they understood Rome. They could properly represent the culture, the laws, the philosophy. They were Rome in Philippi. They were Rome in Ephesus. They were the manifestation of Rome, the ecclesia. You know, one of the things that he points out in understanding the word is that Jesus had other terms available to him, religious terms. He could have said, I'm building my temple. He could have said, I'm building my synagogue, but he didn't. He specifically, purposefully used a secular governmental word to say what he was establishing as his people on earth. It was the ecclesia. And why is that important? Because there's differences between the temple, the synagogues, and the ecclesia. Ed points, I'm just going to read it here. Whereas the temple and the synagogue differ with Jesus' ecclesia in the areas of constitution, location, and mobility. The temple and the synagogue were static institutions that functioned in buildings that members had to go to on specified occasions, whereas the ecclesia was the buildingless, mobile people movement designed to operate 24/7 in the marketplace for the purpose of having an impact on everybody and everything all the time. That's what the ecclesia was. That's what the ecclesia is. It's not a building. It's not a church. It's not a temple. It's not a synagogue. It's the people of God that meet wherever they're at and legislate the kingdom on earth. That's an important word. Hey, the second book that I have listed there is Insurgents by Frank Viola. And this is not a book commercial. I'm just sharing with you some of the words that I learned from these important books in my life this year. But please, get a copy of Insurgents. This is probably the most important book written this decade, honestly. It's incredible, reclaiming the gospel of the kingdom. But one page out of these 433 pages of this book, he shares a word, and the word is gospel. Gospel is now a strictly religious term. It wasn't in the day that Jesus and the disciples employed it. It was a Roman term. It was used by evangelists, heralds, messengers when there was a new emperor. Rome would send out heralds throughout the empire to proclaim that they have a new emperor in charge. They have, with the emperor comes peace and salvation and blessings, but they must pledge their allegiance and worship the emperor. They must give him their full loyalty and allegiance. So that's the term that Jesus used to proclaim the good news. The good news is there's a new king in town, and he owns everything, and he desires everything. The gospel, it's more than just good news. It's heralding a new empire. And last but not least is Unchurching, out of my top 3 books that I read this year. Unchurching Christianity Without Churchianity by Richard Jacobson. Excellent book, excellent read. I don't have a copy with me because I've lent it out. I'm quibbling here a little bit because he doesn't talk about this word. But I went to his online forum, unchurching.com, and in there was a discussion on this word. And it's also discussed in a blog by Frank Viola. And that word is heresy. Heresy, if you look it up in our dictionary today, it has become, it's come to mean a teaching of false doctrine, to teach unorthodox doctrine. But where it's different in the Bible is if you read, especially in the old translations, King James and such, where it talks about heresy, they're not speaking of false doctrine. The word Greek heresis is actually speaking of a person who causes separation, divisions, and puts into factions and groups. So you could be coming with truth and true doctrine and cause heresy in that way. You can cause division and splits. In fact, Paul was accused of heresy when he came and he brought the gospel of the kingdom. Paul's message split the Jewish group into the believers of the way and the Orthodox Jews. So when the admonition in the New Testament to Galatians 2:20, the sinful nature, 22 I think it is, the fruit of the sinful nature, one of them is heresy in the old translations. What it's speaking of is causing divisions, not false doctrine. Go read that blog. I'll post a link to it here. Very good, very worthwhile. When I do my next post, we're going to talk about some of my pet peeve words. I've got a little list of words that I don't use anymore or try to use correctly. Hope to see you then. This is Newt from OK Island.